Hello guys, and welcome to a track breakdown from Octavate. This is Anders, aka Coop, aka half of Octavate speaking, with...
This is George, the other half of Octavate, and also Exalt as a solo alias.
Today we'll be breaking down a track for you, but we will also talk about the workflow and the premise of the creation of this track. So first off, we want to get into the outsides of the track here, because every factor in making a track will help decide what it becomes. So maybe we should talk about first what kind of style Octavate is, and what we do.
And also how we met, I think, is important.
Yeah.
So basically,
take it off.
Yeah, we met actually at Basecamp. So part of DNB Academy, and it was a few years ago, 3 years ago, I think. The first time we met, and we went for 2 consecutive years, and then on that second year is when we started first making tracks together, I think, properly.
Yeah.
You came over to London one time and we did like a little practice just to see, because obviously you don't really know what it's going to be like working with another person until you sit down, and every collaboration dynamic is different. Like, some people I collaborate with is just over the internet and you just send things back and forth and it works. It's a really cool way of collaborating, because you have more time on your own with the track and you can take it on different directions to have more input, whereas our dynamic is much more in person. We only write tunes in person, then we send things back and forth in order to mix and kind of get it to a finished product.
Yeah, so all the major strokes of the track really comes in our intimate chemistry, so to say. We don't bounce it back and forth, because as we create this, it's in a span of one day. And this gives a focus as well, where our individual musicalities come to shine, and in different aspects, because my music is maybe too crazy, and George's music is the other way around. And in this unity, we can come to Octavate, where we can find a balance of these two dynamics interplaying, because we're constantly very critical about what comes about. And this product is what we would like to go through with you.
Yeah.
So yes.
So yeah, just on that topic of like how we work together, and we typically sit down for a day at a time, and usually multiple consecutive days, and we'll try and get the framework of a tune complete in that day, based on a particular brief. Like for this track, it was a jungle track, and basically it worked for, I guess, like 12 to 15 hours in that day, I guess, in order to get something where you can kind of bounce it and it's a whole tune, but obviously not a finished tune, but the premise is there.
Yeah, like a skeleton, so solid as possible and with as much flesh as possible. Sometimes the V1s could be very decent for playing out the same night on the decks, and that is the goal.
Yeah,
to get the idea as finished as possible. And it came about by a lot of we sat separately for some time before meeting up, and for this we sat and did different things, prepared ourselves like this. One of the things we did was create small sketches. I sat down, did like 10 half-hour sketches where it sought to indicate some sort of coming skeleton that we could work on together, me and George. And out of these 10, this was one of them. And George then did dedicated work, in more like in detail, but in a same vein. A lot of the FX that we hear here, he would come up with. So we as well had a bank on that for the jungle tune. And then you could kind of go to war with this premise, which is make a jungle tune. It's very vague, which means you can unfold creatively. And Shall we not hear the track?
Yeah, let's hear it.
There's a lot of talking about.
Yeah,
a
lot of stuff. But let's hear the tune, and then we'll walk through like the individual elements and how we put it together, and some processing and stuff. So yeah. So I think that's probably enough hearing it all the way through. We'll go through the second drop and stuff as it varies as we get into the breakdown. So starting off with the drums. Guess we'll just go down the sections. Drums. There's a more drums group, a drum effects group, a bass group, a layer called Huge. This is a particular bass sound that we wanted to cut through everything else, primarily the bass. So that's why it's separate from the bass group. There's also some vox, mids, which are like melodic elements, and effects. So drums. What we have here, we have one single kick. It's called Juicy Goo. It sounded good, and there is no processing on it whatsoever, it looks like, which I'm quite surprised by, but we'll just roll with that. So yeah, it's just sitting there. It's, I guess sometimes you find a sample and it just works, but we didn't actually, I think that's maybe the only time I've ever not processed a kick in any way. But what do you know?
If it works, it works.
If it works, it works. If it sounds good, it sounds good. I guess that's one lesson in music is if it sounds good, it sounds good. So with the snare, pretty simple as well. I guess like one thing like with this simplicity is when I was getting into music production, I definitely overcomplicated, and I just load a track into Ableton and there'd be loads of default effects there, which would, for one, slow down my PC massively, and two, they were just unnecessary if you pick the right sound. A lot of it comes down to just finding the right sounds that fit rather than trying to force things into a certain soundscape where they might not fit. So with the snare, quite simple, just a simple high pass with a little dip around 500 hertz where there's some mud, and then a transient master. It's a good transient shaper, go to just increasing the attack and cutting the sustain and limiting.
Also, what causes such simplicity in kick and snare for this kind of tune is that a lot of the drum energy and overall, like, it's in this kind of track, it's all about the breaks, really. It's about stacking all of these organic different breaks. So the kick and snare we choose are also quite bare in that sense. It's sampled and layered on top of the other things, and just cuts, not even cutting that much, but adding a lot to the overall groove to really add emphasis to the kick and snare rhythm. And that, I think, leads us to the breaks.
Pretty simple. It's quite a thuddy kick, and yeah, there's not much click or transient to it. It's quite soft and organic, which kind of works well with jungle. You don't want too transient heavy kicks in jungle, typically. Quite soft on the low end. But yeah, snare has some reverb coming from on the group. There is a reverb chain with just Ableton standard reverb. It sounds great on fairly short setting, nothing on the chain, so it doesn't affect the signal of the snare. We have a EQ that is off, a saturator clipper which is also off, and I think I was experimenting with these and I ended up using Panks, which is it's a multi-band transient shaper by a guy called Oversampled, who has a pretty good YouTube channel, and it's actually quite heavily cutting the transient of the snare to make it so it's a bit less overbearing on that initial kind of mid frequency transient. Just kind of controls it, but keeps it sounding quite loud. So yeah, onto the breaks. You wanna kick things off on the breaks?
Yes, I do. Though, I think we have to pause, man, and fix the audio of the Discord so that I can hear what is going on in the project.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's I completely forgot that you wouldn't. Right. So how do you do that? Okay, so shall I just
I think you can pause
OBS, I can pause. Okay,
yeah.
We're live again, so do you want to kick it off with the breaks?
Yeah, start playing the breaks.
Cool.
From Yes. Perfect. And yeah, let's hear the phrase out. Cool. Now stop it. As we hear here, so much of the breaks are truly just a lot of layers, but soon in a kind of story that lasts the phrase, and it also reflects the arrangement we have going, which is this jungle style. It's driven by a lot of half chaotic changing rhythms, and the breaks are to reflect this. So we have a lot of different break groups. Many of them have been processed by duplication, and they are in different pitch, so that it will be the same break with the same kind of spirit that this break has. Everyone knows that one break carries a certain kind of spirit, and if you want the frequency to be boosted without layering, because as soon as you layer a different break with the first break, it's now a new kind of vibe it has. And keeping the same vibe, you can duplicate these different layers in different pitches, so the frequencies will be more filled out, and then mix accordingly so that the main layer will still be the carrier of this kind of signal. And this is done on multiple occasions because we have a lot of different breaks that we cycle between. Some are constant, others come and go. And what we discussed a lot in terms of mix, normally we just cut them, cut the worst and beef up the best, and then put down the volume. But one break, we couldn't decide whether or not to have the low mids or the mids removed. Maybe we can circle in on that break and take a look at that.
Which break is that? Do you know?
It's the bassy one. It's the only one with low mids inside. It's probably that one, yeah. It is that one.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a good one to go through because if you look, like you were saying about the clips being processed differently, I think you, like when we started producing together, you were always very advanced in how you were processing breaks. I'd say like you do a lot of like manual chops and just like reorganization in order to make new kind of break melodies. So it's pretty, like a lot of people may use like a sampler and they'll chop that way, but like it's perfectly viable to do it just in the audio, and just you got to be careful of clicks obviously, but you can get some really interesting like rhythm changes with the reversing and chopping up. But yeah, what I was going to say is this one is the original. It's warped, but it's not like transposed or anything. This one is sitting at -5, so it's like the pitch down version. So there's some more low mids, and then the next one is also -5, but it's got all of the transients. So
it's +5, isn't it?
Oh yeah, +5, and it's got the transients, whereas the second one has the transients cut. So
yeah, because the audio, when you pitch it down, it becomes slower. That's why body is better pitched down in this kind of layering, and transient is better pitched up, because naturally that's what the audio will do.
And in terms of processing, there's some like pretty significant EQ on the third layer to remove the tops, and some cancerous frequencies up here at like 12K. Some reverb that's automated, but actually looks like it never comes on until right at the end of the track. Fair enough. And then in comparison to the second layer, the pitch down layer, which has its low mids and its tops are much more present, I guess, because it's
it isn't though, because of the variant EQ there.
Oh right, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, so
so the tops are present in the beginning there to feed into the reverb, so that can be very full, this reverb.
Yep.
And then it's cut out because you only want the main kind of high frequencies from the main kit in this case. But it goes to show that using this technique you can carve a lot of different drum sample sounds and really build your breaks how you want them, where it's still this original break you're sampling.
Yeah, so like I'd say like on its own, kind of thin. I mean, it's got a lot of organicness.
It's got all the right stuff in there.
Yeah, it's all the right stuff. It's a great break, but then together, like with all three, a lot more warmth to it.
Yeah, and a room is established as well, that the break is inside. Yeah, I guess then the rest is just arrangement stuff, really, for the breaks.
Yeah, so I guess
unless we're going to go through all of them, we could do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the main break here. This Worries break is kind of the foundation break, present from the intro in all the drops. And then at the end of the phrases, we use like different reply breaks. So it's like a call and response between the first and the second.
Yeah, so first phrase, it's mostly about the Worries break, but all of the breaks all of the pauses are then filled out by different breaks. So it's always new. And that's why the breaks on its own are actually holder of story in that sense of arrangement that it has. And it's also a certain fixed amount of breaks that we use to. So this is the main break, this is the main reply, like you would do with the bass. And it's actually the exact same as having a very active bass group, this, when I see it now and hear it. Having a lot of different replies, building in a system that always builds systematically, just with breaks. And that is a great foundation to make a jungle chaos.
Yep.
Really.
I think another thing it's useful to point out on the processing front, a lot of these breaks have trash on them. And I say
dynamic trash.
Yeah, there's all kinds of trash. You're a big user of trash. I don't use it so much, but I really like. Like it as a plugin. It's just I don't use it that much anymore. But yeah.
Same, yeah. I don't use it much at all either, actually.
Yeah, we
only
have
for the dynamics
stopped.
mostly.
Yeah, I guess we use a lot more just Ableton, amp, and saturator now, I guess, than trash. Yeah.
The simplicity of just firing it up, because the saturator is a tool that you can use in so many goes on one channel. Yeah.
So in here there's a mix of trash use as a saturator distorter and also as a multi-band gate.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just hear some when that comes on, see what it's doing.
And it was as soon as the arrangement was finished, we were transitioning into the mix phase in order to make the tune better. And we noticed all of this lovely warmth and livelihood that all these breaks had were in fact a lot of mud in the low mids. So we had to be very careful about what low mids we could even have in there. And that's why we had a big discussion about the main break, because we were almost also cutting the lows of the main break. They're still quite thin, but now they sit well with all the basses. And this is the trash that we use, the multi-band gate, because you can cleanly control what will come through at different bands. So the high end can stay lush while the lows are controlled.
Yeah, so actually, unfortunately, some of the ones up top, they are actually automated, so they only come on when there are no clips playing, so they're not actually doing anything at all. But a good example is on this wall piece break, there's a trash with the same settings of multi-band gating. So just
how is the mid? The mid band there, how is that?
Pretty cut.
Nice.
So that's with the trash on, and then with trash off. It's like kind of the issue is you get a lot
sharp.
You get a lot of flabbiness if you just layer loads and loads of breaks that are quite organic, so they have a lot of rumble to them in like the 200, 300, 400 hertz areas, and not much transients often, so it's good to use a multiband gate to cut a lot of that mud and boost.
It can work as a transient isolator in a way, the way you map the gate, do the gating. So it's really good for breaks like these that are messy.
Yes. So basically, we continue the theme here on the breaks of just like carving out space for the EQ and either gating or saturating the breaks. It just makes them sit well. Here again, it's just reverb, Ableton saturator, analog clip with some drive and soft clip on, so it's just like soft clipping that saturated signal. And then this is a trash with tape saturation and a different dynamic preset, but the same sort of technique.
Yeah. And we have quite a steep reverb on many of these breaks, and we put that before the saturator. So the saturator will saturate the part wet signal coming now from the breaks with reverb on, and in this way merging the merging these sounds together a bit, in that they get the same saturation. And saturator really is a glue to these kind of drums, especially to the processing of the drums.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the main kit of kick, snare, single kick, single snare. We have a kick trigger here, which is used just as a signal in order to sidechain to, because it's shorter than the regular kick, slightly. And other than that, in this group, we just have a kick roll for the intro and build. Just gradually. Doesn't actually change. Yeah, it's not automated. I thought it was, but it's just a standard kick roll. And then one interesting sound is this bloops sound, which is
yeah, and I think that's the Ableton metronome.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, that's a weird one actually. We were making the tune and we did a resampling, and the resample, for some reason, it took the Ableton metronome sound. And then, so if I take the processing off this, it should just be...
And seek to unwarp it as well.
Yeah, and I think it's just transposed as well.
Yeah.
That's the metronome. So, yeah, quite a nice sound. And then when you hear it in the context of the whole drums.
And again, we hear the story element to this kind of junky tune, in that we seek to have a percussive element inside of the drums, which is delayed like a proper jungle FX. But as soon as the next drum phrasing comes in, we cut it harshly. So all of the previous room you were in, we make sure to kill it most of the times. Sometimes we don't. For example, the second time around, it gets to linger, but it gives a different vibe again. Having a very clear conscious about what you let into what phrases and how the phrasing is, especially in drums, because they determine the room. That's very important, and something which is great in jungle. And it comes from the very old school way of sampling, because you had one sample playing, then you took another sample playing, and these had inherent rooms in them. And mimicking this and remembering this is very great for making intricate drum stories, like I would argue this is.
Yep. So in terms of also the writing of this kind of sound, like you're saying, really ties into the story of this call and response of different breaks, and you're adding another element here in the switch. And then it becomes, typically we do this a lot in our tunes, is something introduced in the switch will become more of a feature in the second drop. So you can see it's part of the build, the first phrase, the second drop, and then present for a lot of the rest of the tune. So it's kind of like you bring familiarity to it here, and then you kind of embellish on that story as the track goes on.
Exactly.
It's nice to do it with quite a subtle sound as well, because you it doesn't really stick out in the mix. It's not like a new entire melody. It's just sits at the back, but it's something that carries the flow of the track.
Yeah, it has the functionality of like a ride, which always gives a B phrase kind of vibe, and here it gives a unique vibe there that we then use later on a lot, like you say.
So then onto the drum bus processing. We have, let me turn it all off so you can see. So with no drum bus processing, it sounds like this. Well, that's not a good section because of the we deliberately filter out the breaks in the first bit, so there's not everything to show. But here,
Yeah, the drum bass is clear to hear here.
Yeah. So what we've got is we have the Ableton drum bass on a low mix, just doing some soft distorting, and also it's got a kind of a low pass coming down to about 10k, so you don't get the harsh high frequencies as you're doing that distortion. And we pulled the transients back because then it gets rid of a lot of the mud in this distorted signal. So that's actually on a 26% mix the whole time. Then this EQ is something I actually have a massive problem with, and it never came up when we were making the tune. But I typically don't like having the Ableton EQ with just like cuts on the lows and highs. I mean, it's probably fine, and it probably is a fine way of doing it.
I think it does something. Dan Worrell has made an excellent video on just this, and
I just feel like cuts like this
on major groups, you should not risk this, because it will just mess a little bit with the sound. And if you do this enough, for example, on the master or something, suddenly you will sit with the worst stuff in your hands. There is a science to it, of course, but we mere mortals just know that it's a little bit tricky. So we would not recommend this. This should be reflected in the mix of the individual elements. But this is a lazy solution, and it is doable. But be wary.
Usually what we do these days is automate it so it's only on when the filters are happening, so then it's reducing the time where it can cause resonances. Obviously when you're doing hard cuts on things like drum groups and bass groups, it will produce small resonances in the sound, and it varies depending on which EQ you use. Like often if you use Pro Q3 on the linear phase setting, it will help reduce that phasing from the cuts being made drastically. With the Ableton EQ, you don't have that function, so it has the tendency to do it. But not to say it's all bad, because sometimes they can be pleasant. You know, it can make pleasant resonances, which do change the actual the frequencies of your sound in order to, you know, sonically they will sound differently. And that can work. So it's not like you can't use it. It's just like it does have risks in the balance of a mix. Next up we have...
And then what we got?
Pretty standard stuff, just boosting the top bands. Nothing really special going on. I don't think it's hugely... Nothing crazy.
Just a nice old imaging to get even more width out of these nice organic breaks.
This filter pleases me to see that it's only on when when we need it. The delay as well.
What's that?
It's
just at 1 point.
Yeah.
Let's hear it. Yeah. We want to flange it a bit, like not flange it, but you heard it.
Yeah.
Really get it nice and wide and shifting from one side to the other. So that's a ping pong on the drum bus to really get it out there.
And Ableton delay is, I'd say, it's a really powerful tool for kind of sound effects as well as in like if you automate it.
Yeah, these different modes, the repitch mode especially is very interesting, man. And that delay is, you're right, you said it. It's a powerful tool. Sure.
You can get like flanges out of it, really nice flangey, phasery sounds just by automating the delay times and changing them so they're matching or not, and just automating stuff is great with this tool.
But now also comes into play a funny philosophy of ours, because in the imager many of you might have looked at all the red dots and as well noticed how we are redlining in so many places actually. In the end here we just put the glue compressor with the soft clip, and we put another clip after that. But these actions we take even on, even leading out to the master, that some of the distortions, the ones we hear, they can sound good enough, that they can be very good actually. And we just make it so that the DAW will not clip when we bounce it out. So we have a limiter on the master, but we're actually clipping up until that point in certain degrees, and listening closely to these clippings, and they can work easily work well. So don't be scared if it sounds, you gotta of course know that it's not a distortion of a bad kind. But if it sounds good, some of these red lights don't have to be bad. I think it's important to address that, because I know some people are mixing low, mixing like -12. We mix at around 0, so that we have a somewhat scale of reference to the real world, so to say. We mix it in that level, and we actually remove one obstacle there, the matching the levels, because we want to match the level from the get-go. And it's great to get your mind in the club setting like that, that the arrangement is actually speaking in this scale from the get-go.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And just to add to that, what we try and do with the leveling of the tune is like, I mean, often you start with the drums and you start with the bass. I mean, it varies. It's drum and bass. Typically, I think people start with the drums and bass because they're such fundamental parts of the tune. With the drums here, we have nothing crazy going on with the glue compressor or standard clip. It's just like a tiny bit of gain, boost, and soft clip pro, 1% of the saturator, and the ceiling on. So, but all it's really doing is, it's giving some of that like saturated, distorted clipping, but in a nice way. And like a lot of people do, send their drum bus and their bass groups to particular rooms, reverbs or distortions. It's about making that that particular sound for your track, like a stylistic choice. And with jungle, it's quite gritty and dirty, and you don't want it too clean and clinical. So it's actually quite nice to have a bit of that saturating distortion at the end of your drum bus in order to just glue it together. It's a lot thinner just with that, without that little boost of gain and that 1% of saturator. And then in combination with this, like you touched on with trying to get the tune club ready. So we have drums where we know, let me just pull up span. We have drums that we know are hitting roughly the right level. Typically that is, and depends on how you reference your tunes and how you AB tunes, but from listening to a lot of drum and bass and referencing a lot of drum and bass, they typically have your top end hitting around -30 on this particular scale. Obviously it depends on the visualizer you use, and subs hitting also around -30. So if you can get your drums sounding loud and clear and not completely smashed, in combination with your sub, you know that these levels are likely going to translate well in a club setting because they are roughly as loud as other tunes that are professionally mastered, and you can then just, hopefully, if you're not going too crazy into the master, you can then export your tune and you could play it, you could mix it at home, you could play it potentially in the club, and you'd know that it would be relatively the same balance of key elements as other professionally mastered tunes.
Yes. And that is great to put some of the responsibility of judgment over to your eyes and your rationale rather than feeling about, oh, is it good, is it not good? Look at the numbers, because it can give such a clear sense of anchor that that you can carry on with what matters in the tune, so to say. Set the stop right, mix it accordingly to the other elements, and if you hit that -30 and everything is playing along with that, then you know you're good to a far extent of the way.
It's quite a controversial topic because obviously, like, lots of people are taught you should only ever, you don't mix with your eyes, mix with your ears, and obviously you should use your ears train your ears. It's about training your ears as best as you can to understand how to take the track in a direction that's going to make it better and closer to being finished, but you can still use visual aids to your advantage. And here we have the span, which we're using to level, and also a LUFS meter, one I use a lot, and it's, if you got Ableton you can get it, it's about $5 I think. This is something that's just a Max for Live device somebody's made, and it shows you your LUFS, and if you reference a lot of drum and bass, you'll notice that the luffage is typically, tunes will be between like 6 and 7, sometimes loud tunes will be up to -5. They do go higher than that. There is a loudness war, it's a thing, but if you can get your LUFS to sit around -6 to -7, you know it's going to be easily loud enough.
Loud enough.
Yeah,
definitely.
So they're the kind of ballparks we go through. Just while I'm here, just talking quickly about the master, just because it's definitely good to not produce with a limiter on your master from the get-go, because it may color your sound. What we tend to do is we start with nothing on the master, and then as the tune is progressing and we're making new versions, when we want to bounce, we'll put a limiter on it. And what we're trying to do here is just make it so it's clipped to 0 dB, or this is going to 0 dB or minus 0.1, without coloring the sound too much. So
yeah, and this way of mastering puts on, ideally it tries to skip the master, so that only the mix is what you need to tweak, so that in the mix, this is where every bit of magic should happen. The master should just, put the final bit of control on. And it's also controversial because many people like a very lengthy mastering stage, but for us this is a freedom, because we don't have to worry about the master. We just slap on the control and then we let the mix do the speaking.
It's another really good point, especially because if you do a really, really complex mastering chain that is lots of EQing, limiting, compression, maybe distortion, and then you send your tune off to master, typically a mastering engineer that a label uses will want you to have a pre-master with headroom and with no processing on the master, typically. If you're then taking off all of your processing that is doing a huge amount of coloring and a huge amount of legwork for your mix, then it's going to be difficult for the mastering engineer to replicate the sound you have as your final home master. So if you do all that work in the mix, you can literally just turn off the mastering chain, bring down the gain on your master channel, and then export the track with headroom, and it's going to sound pretty much very similar to how you had it when you were clipping that's not doing very much coloring. And hopefully the master you get back is going to sound like yours in terms of loudness, because they'll know they can push it to the point you had it limited without it distorting crazily, and hopefully like tighter and cleaner, and with some subtle touches to make things more pleasant. Boosting certain frequencies, the finesse that a mastering engineer often puts on, that should then be a bonus to your tune, rather than it sounding completely different to how you expected.
Hi, I'm Icicle and welcome to my studio. I'm a drum and bass producer from Holland, if you didn't know. I used to live in England for a long time, and together with Drum and Bass Academy I have made a course describing my entire process. It's an Ableton course over 4 hours long, in which I go through drum design, drum programming, sound design, bass lines, composition and arrangement, some advanced sound design techniques as well, and mastering. Included are the project files as well, samples, presets, everything, so you can properly follow along with me and get to the same result as myself. So I hope you enjoy.
So, do you want to kick us off with the more drums section? Here we go. We have more drums.
More drums. Let's hear it, first of all.
Yeah.
Soloed. Yeah. That's a sheener. Maybe a nice technique to cover, actually. The sheen. And I was introduced to it by you. You said to me in one of my tunes that you need some sheen. And it's a very specific thing where you have a layer of percussion, be it a shaker or a hi-hat, which is super washed out with reverb in such a fashion that it is just that noise. Then you put on heavy compression for kick and snare so that it gets very percussive, this noise. So you see where it lies in the frequencies there from 10k and up, and then it's sitting there but being beaten away by the kick and snare, while having such a low volume that it sounds like it's the room of all of the drums that gives off this sheen of energy, really. It's like, imagine that you hear some music, and behind this music you hear there are 100,000 musicians playing along on this, and in the very back, or that's the kind of vibe you get. This sheen from a lot of instruments playing, and it gives such live energy and finesse to a mix of drums, and it's such a cheeky little trick. So let's try and hear the drums and put that sheen on off.
So pre-sheen, post-sheen.
Yeah.
You can see the hole in this frequency analyzer where this sits. It's just like that 15, 16K area. It just gives it a little...
It fills it out, like, makes it fuller in a funny way. It's a great technique, and it's one that we utilize in almost every track.
And like you said, I think it's really good that it's that the effect is that effect of like a band being recorded. You know, that kind of that resonance of multiple instruments is a good way to put it.
It gives this extra life and room, and that's always what you want to be careful of, that you don't have in electronic music, because we are sitting in a box.
Oh, next up we have
Rides.
Classic. And I think these were actually these were added in. They weren't added in until version 1.7. So we do like a 0.1 for every like session, I guess. And this was finished at 2.1, so it's like, you know, 10, 11 sessions, and maybe more. You don't always save, but like this was added quite late in the game, so it was would have been, we were sending the tune between each other, and you said this needs rides, and
and it's again, it's the same. It's the drum story, but expanded again. The ride is what gives it a setting of newness, a new flavor to the same old. And as we were coming closer to the D phrase, this ride needed to come into play in order to make the story more convincing from a drum perspective. Really.
Exactly. And then we have, in the second drop, introduced a new element for this drum story of bongos. So these sound like this. Very wide. One pan 50 to the right, one pan 50 to the left, so hard pan.
And then the delay added to one track over there, all the way to the right.
Oh yeah, okay.
That is to make it to make it wide, so that they will have this ping pong effect, almost zero feedback ping pong. Let's hear how they sound in mono. That's what you want to check when you do a technique like this, splitting them out. Want to see that it just sounds decent in mono as well.
Typically, well, in every tune I just have it set up so on my master there's a utility, I press 2 in monos, just a very quick, easy way of summing.
Not that bad, but still, you know, you can clearly hear that this is actually ping pong at play. But actually now
I think they sound good. They sound good in mono, which is important.
With the kind of flame. Yeah.
Well, because they're actually delayed, not just pan side to side, you still get some of that wideness to them, because they're not hitting at the same time in the center.
Oh yeah, you're right. But actually, now that we are in the second drop, we should probably listen to the breakdown and the second drop, the first half of second drop anyway.
Okay, cool.
To kind of talk a little bit more of like the broad arrangement, I think.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Fire it up. And then we're back. to the main groove of the track. Oof, such a sudden ending there.
Yeah, brutal.
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the broadly speaking, the arrangement of this tune.
Yes.
So just to break it down there, we have an intro driven by mainly this distant breaks with a lot of reverb, and then the Rasta orchestra with like Rasta hype man vibes as well going there. So we want to zoom out. We want to keep it everything at a distance, but at a like cool sounding distance. That's what we want, because then we can zoom in for the drop, so that the drop will seem louder as well, because it's actually not that verbed up. So yeah, it's actually quite harshly put aside with just drum effects, and then the orchestra comes on, and we keep it. We keep all of the atmospherics there organic. We keep all of this intro in the organic realm, in the sample realm, rather than having sick sci-fi FX jungle FX sounds on. We spare them in the intro actually, and then save them for the drop when it gets electric. So it's a way as well, this room you keep in the intro, to a way as well to have it like organic, and then you open up into the realm of the electronic music on the drop. And that's actually a good rule of thumb, to keep it wide and then zoom in on the drop. Yeah, and then we expand upon this one groove for 2 phrases. We very usually do this, and then have a drastic switch. It's not this drastic here because all of it is chaotic, but it is drastic enough to be a kind of switch in the groove. For breakdown then, we keep it similar to the intro, but still different yet. Well, it's different, but we keep it simple, similar in the kind of theme. We go to a very distant realm.
Very wet.
Very wet realm, yeah. And then we seek to build.
Yep.
And in this particular drop, we do another switch. Normally we will go to the switch, but the switch and the main phrasing in this first drop is quite alike, really. Mm-hmm. So also having the same melodious carrying in the breakdown, you will get tired of this melodious movement. So we change it up completely and put a new bass on a new root for the second drop.
Yeah. So
maybe 2 entire phrases. Yeah.
If we just look at like we did with the drums with the break story, if we look at the bass story, then it'll help.
Yes.
We can then demonstrate that change of melody and bass patch. So the primary bass is these 3 layers. Typically, just like with the breaks, very similar techniques of having different layers of the same instrument processed differently in different frequency regions. So you have here the actual sub in operator, a mid layer that's just EQ'd just for the mids and compressed, and then another top layer. So together.
Ooh, and now we cannot skip that. What made that awesome noise, George? What made that noise?
So we got some racks up in here. We've got this big ass horn rack, which we put together for this tune. The whole of the 3 layers, so the sub layer, the mid layer, are all being sent there, and on their own, they just sound pretty MIDI-like, It's like
MIDI-like. It's very filling out a body, so to say.
But then with this rack, and I think it was actually an accident. I actually intended to have it down to infinity, so there would be no. It does go down in some places, but it was kind of an accident.
It's also coloring constantly?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah, it was
fuzz.
An untidy automation there that makes it send a little bit, and all of this heavy distortion and saturation in the rack will boost up these frequencies and give it what it needed.
Yeah,
because with MIDI, it's so controlled, but you will always lack the spirit, and this oftentimes, to me anyway, and to George as well, comes in the form of amp reverb and saturation. And
Yep.
that this rack here is now the bass flavor. It's like having a drum room. There is a certain flavor to, and it's very favorable to have one set of, for example, reverb, but in this case distortion, to flavor many sounds.
So
and
just walking through this rack, and
let's try that.
We have starting off with the reverb, which is, I guess, is kind of unusual.
Let's turn them on one by one.
Yeah.
Because then as well, it's this thought process is explained. These racks don't come by us sitting with the fold in our head for 30 seconds and then saying, I have it. It's a matter of experimentation, and it's a matter of collecting and having an open ear to the opportunities that presents themselves. So we have the MIDI sound. We know that it needs some body, some room. So we apply the room, and then we know that it needs some dirt. So we apply the amp, and we go forward like this, trying to use the toolbox in our heads to, well, how can we add more to this so it gets better all the time? And oftentimes this is cutting as well. So yeah, now we can take them one by one. So
yeah, just reverb on it first. It is just quite a short, I don't know where it's just from Ableton's convolution reverb, but it's just a default ambience. But then when you combine that with the amp, you get such nice results. I mean, like you could have that, you could spend hours resampling just the combinations of these elements, like at different levels, and changing the amp type, like it's just different sounds every time. It definitely depends on your input sound here, because I think we just have quite a warm sub. It really distorts well into some nice upper harmonics and like top frequencies, whereas if you had something that was already really top heavy, it would just become, at this stage of amping and reverbing, probably quite a ugly, cancerous mess. But
yeah, so this rack is especially tailored to this particular MIDI patch. And that's why it's very good to have a lot of EQs inside as well. For this case, for example, I will put an EQ just before the amp after the reverb and try fiddling with the different bells and just going high and low in all of the key factors, really trashing this EQ to see how the amp will respond. And then you can know how you should mix into the amp to gain nice distortions.
Exactly.
But luckily we had a good get-go here, so we carry on with no EQ. More amp.
So yeah, here some erosion to give some put some noise in the top end.
In this situation we are thinking about more top end.
You want it to cut through because we have quite a organic style drum kit, like quite, rides and organic breaks. So something quite top end distorted can provide a nice contrast. I mean, that looks pretty cool. Just some boosting of the top bands to give it the width, and then cutting.
And there is the cutting. Yeah, that's almost a shame, huh?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Nice. And there again is the EQ to, rather than fix stuff, make stuff. Adding a bell in such a expressive chain is great for flavor, before and after.
I don't know if this was actually on in the final tune. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't
think we ended up using it, but it is.
But some of the touches were on, wasn't they? Or is it entirety off?
I think the entirety was off, but.
But even in the other one, we see, we see this almost happening. One of these is flailing to the left and right there. The number 7, isn't it? Yeah.
Number 7.
Not doing much, but well, it was something we tried out and decided against in this case.
Yeah, it just comes to the wider premise of distorting, cutting, automating filter movements. Like you can see when this is on, it may not actually be that nice, but when you have the rest of the chain on and you automate a peak of something being distorted through that distortion, you can get some very nice resonances.
As long as you control
you know, like that, because it's going there.
Big room.
Yeah, another. Like after the EQ cuts, we have some saturating drive, and then a rack processing some reverb on the horn to give it that big room horn sound. But then EQing the reverb.
Well, around the rack. But now suddenly it sounds like a horn.
Lots of distortion, lots of reverb, followed by some more EQing.
What does this do? It's just some filtering here and there?
Just some filtering. It's just a hard low pass at that point in the breakdown for some reason, but it's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, put all those elements together, we have a horn, which is just a send.
So let's hear again the bass alone for one phrase. So there it is. Call and response. And it is reflected in the drums as well. What do we need here for the story? We have some FX, right? Let's try and let's hear the story without drums. Let's just try that. Hear this first phrase, just with the drums off. Yes, so here we can start to talk about all of these FX. In jungle, to help upon the chaos, almost constantly, it's nice to have some kind of delay tail to really get that dub vibe in there. And this we do by both the vocal and a lot of other things. Small, it just has to be festive and support the main idea of the track. And then it's actually reflected in all of the instruments. It's like call and response, and then and one of these responses is a break, one is not. A break as in a pause, and later on this pause will be filled out, and it will just be this main story with more and more fillings. And it actually goes for the bass, it goes for the FX, it goes for the drums, and to get that reflected in all of the different instrument sections will just create a nice unified red thread led story. Yeah,
very true. And we will get onto each of those elements. We'll just finish off the bass just so we can,
of course,
tie that together, and then we'll look at that whole supplementary elements. So yeah, after like you were saying about the call and response, we have the wobbler, which is two serum patches. Oh, this is off. One serum patch, a couple of sine waves with the LFO is controlling the tuning. The sine waves are detuned by one semitone, 52 cents on the second one, and that just gives that effect of wobbling and pitching down. Pretty simple. And then all that's happening there is just the dimension. Oh, it's off. It's being distorted, driven pretty hard with the tube, and then compress on the multiband mode, and that gives it its character. So pretty simple, bass mono on the utility, and then some EQ. That's the wobbler. And then just looking at the the bass group processing, we have a ozone cutting the stereo of anything below 140 hertz and massively boosting the rest of the bands, because we wanted some width in the bass. I think there's a lot of just sines, and it's quite mono, and we wanted that width. So there's that. A dynamic compressor, which is turned off. Sometimes we use this in order to kind of control the lows, but we didn't feel it was needed in the final tune. And then a sidechain to the kick, just with the Ableton standard Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and then a sidechain to the element called huge, which is something we took
Let's hear
out.
those two together.
Yeah, I did mention this one earlier, and it's just something that we wanted to cut through. So.
Yeah.
So only really sidechains to the bass, I think. I think at this point it's
lovely sound.
Yeah, completely silent. This came about as just a chop from a big. Oh yeah, it's just a chop from the wobble.
It's a delay. Yeah, the reverb tail, right? Awesome. What is this?
Let me just set it up.
Solo it.
It's for some reason.
It's automate. It's transient mode.
Interesting. But yeah, I think we're just messing around with the bass, just resampling noises. As a lot of our tune time is spent resampling and just making layers, as you can probably see. But yeah, this is just a nice. It just sounded good as a
That's a great step.
Incidental bit of bass. It just kind of cuts through. So yeah, that cuts through. It's driven pretty hard in the saturator. So now, do you want to go into the elements you're talking about? We have, well, or maybe we should talk about the...
Exactly. Yeah, we got to the second drop, but didn't really get there in...
Yep. So...
Yeah,
we've
so
discussed...
let's just see the bass, really, from second drop. Yeah, go on with the melodious journey.
Yeah,
that's great.
So just, we discussed two of the basses. We have the main jungle sub, melody, and then we have the wobble as a reply. And then as the tune progresses, we introduced a Reese, which is...
Yeah.
Just
Again, we are thinking, it's like with the breaks, chaotic new vibes introduced very schematically, but still chaotically.
Yeah. So it's a operator-made a Reese bass, made in a similar way to the Serum one, but without the pitching down. So it's just detuned. This is just detuned saw waves. Yeah, detuned saw waves, EQ'd and distorted. Instead of a send, this one is a rack. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's just a way of keeping the original signal dry. Here is being compressed with some multiband dynamics, and then having another version of that signal turned down quite a lot, just with some distortion to give it some character. So we introduce it here, and then as the bass riff goes on,
yet another bass. So now we're up to four basses, and counting the send, we have maybe 5 basses. All of them quite a different character and quite a different room to them as well. Again, to add to this constant switching up of everything, really. If you can switch drum set and bass at the same time, you will gain very energetic arrangements.
So the jungle sub leads for the whole of the first drop as the main riff. Often with the tune, we will at the 1C part, which is the switch, just to quickly reference these markers up here. We tend to put a marker every 16 bars with the kind of notation A, B, C, D. I think it's something QZB did in a video I saw years ago. Just helpful way of organizing it. And when you're collaborating and talking about a tune and you're trying to point out specific bits, like, okay, there's a click here, or like this needs a ride. It's easy if you can just have a standard notation, like you know that each letter corresponds to a progression in the phrase of a tune. So C is typically our switch, but in this tune we have a big gap, and then we continue building elements, but we don't necessarily massively switch the tune up. However, these Reeses and green basses that come in, these alt basses, then become the entire foundation of the second drop. So whereas before we led with the horn and the jungle sub, going to the second drop, we lead with
and I think it came about by us having a need for something different, and then looking through the project. What are the tools at our hand?
Yep.
So in the process of creating the groove and arrangement, and as well sounds, we also built up a tool shed that we then could utilize for this quest, which was we need a completely new piece, which is the second drop. And yeah,
this is a really nice way to link back to what you're talking about the effects and the Vox, because I think one of the reasons why it works, and it works, obviously the drums are pretty much the same, but it is a complete switch up of the tune. But the effects are what give you that sense of coherency with the beginning of the tune, because like you said about how they tie the drop together, we just look into this effects group.
Yeah, let's compare them on both drops. Very curious to hear that.
Okay, so we have second drop, lots of laser sounds. Jungle sounds great with laser sounds.
And a very hard cut before the impact drop. So many lasers.
So many lasers. Lots of resampled
lasers.
And
not a lot of crash. We have a very big crash on the 2A drop, which also is a bit China. So it has a bit ride and crash vibe to it, functionality to it. It changes the setting and gives like, whoa, this is intense kind of feeling. While, it's a great way. Crashes are just, there's a reason every drum set has a crash in it.
Yep.
They're great to indicate change, and choosing a very splashy and different crash for a different piece can sometimes be helping to legitimize it.
I was going to say, you made a good point about the difference with the hard cut here. It's quite a chaotic tune. There's a lot of frequencies, there's a lot of drums, there's a lot of different basses. It's jungle. It's like it's funky, it's organic and kind of free flowing. But this is a quite important part of the tune where there's a long build. It's very wet, it's very washed out, and there's a lot of instrumentation. Then we start building back up into the kick roll and ready for the second drop. Basically nothing. There's a reverb tail there, but almost everything is cut, and it makes the second drop hit so much harder. When you play it in a club and you have like a split second of silence like that, or almost silence, it just makes the next noises sound a lot more intense to your ears, even though you're used to the volume of the tune already. It's just that the contrast of quiet to loud makes it more effective, and it's
really.
There's one other point. I think it's here it happens as well.
Yes, where we solo this huge noise completely. So it's only that noise.
And it's quite nice as well to sometimes isolate specific sounds, because then you focus on them. There are sounds that are in drum and bass, particularly because of the tempo and how quickly the drums are moving. It's easy to get everything to get lost in a big mush. Depending on the style of the tune, but it's nice to pay special attention to certain sounds. And
it's also a way to really pinpoint what story we are telling here, so that you're not in doubt that sound for this split second is the main character.
Yep. So anything we want to dig into on the specific effects?
We can maybe talk about just the little ending there of the track. So after this big switch where it's a bit like an adventure, home, out, home. I don't know how it is in English, but the recipe for a good adventure is you stay home, then you get out into the wilderness, and it's very dangerous, and you come home a man.
Nice.
Again. And that's the kind of principle, it's safe for the entirety of the first drop and breakdown, so to say. And then we go out on a limb on the second drop, and then we take it back home again, just to wrap it up. Let's just hear the switch of the second drop, where we reintroduce the main groove, so to say. Everything is building up. And from here on out, you can revel in the re-recognition of the first drop. and then we chill out, so there's something to mix out of and a kind of getting down from all of this.
This tune is also slightly unusual in the gaps we have, because often you tend to have the gap at the end of the phrase in order to then build tension and like reduce elements so they hit harder in the next phrase. But this, maybe because it's the style of jungle it is, there's some big gaps at the beginning of the phrases where we're letting like the vocal and the bass melody just carry on their own. And that's quite a nice contrast as well between the frantic drums and then these gaps where there's just like melody and bass.
True.
Vocals?
How was the outro, the very last bars, actually?
Okay. Cool, let's do that.
Yeah, so intro again. So it's wrapped up in the same clothes. How to say, the front door and the back door, they are painted alike in this tune. But yeah, the vocal we should maybe touch up on. We needed a vocal for this kind of jungly vision we had going, and we just sat and screamed a bit in the laptop, and we came up with one take, which was nice. Or do we use additional takes? That's just another generic sample, is it not?
I think you did a few. I mean, like drum bass, or like music in general, drum bass particularly, because you can have tunes where there's not a lot of vocal. It's nice to have a hook or something just to stick in someone's mind. And with this, we went just with the word straight up. I think we were saying it a lot at the time. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But
yeah, heavily processed and just interesting sounding vocal chop is always good. And because it's heavily processed, it just has to come from the right kind of vibe. If you can record whatever and tweak it enough to make it sound good, one could say. But also, if I mean, just shout some stuff in your microphone have very many times worked for me, and this is what we did here as well.
and
heavily process it.
Yeah, going through that processing, standard vocal take, one take, transposed, messed about with the formants. The Ableton transposing algorithms are really powerful, and you can get some really interesting sound design, be it for if you want to just transpose an actual vocal and make it sound good, or if you want to use it for creative purposes like warping the sound. If you like chop and stretch and transpose it using the texture and tones algorithms, you can get some really freaky sounds, which are great if you like that kind of sound design. So the chain of this vocal, very wet. The theme is wet, and it's
nice foggy jungly chaos.
Big
is what we're going for.
2-second decay times throughout. The wetness is automated, so it's really wet in the that's exactly the kind of processing I was describing. We do it a lot, just like really warp the sounds just using these algorithms. You don't even need any plugins particularly, and that's like another trend of what we do is simplify just by being as lightweight as possible. There may be a lot of elements in the chain, but it's all quite lightweight. There's not a lot of third-party heavy plugins going on in our processing. Reverb, delay, another automated delay, compressor, which is doing some game.
A lot of work, actually.
There's a lot,
and a lot of makeup as well, I'm sure.
Okay.
It's evening out this undynamic bite of sound.
Yeah, evening it out. Then we have EQ, OTT to also compress it, keep it fat, but bring the different frequency areas in, like
fat and flat.
Fat and flat, followed by another delay that's just used here.
Yeah.
Just mix it up.
And that's another great one where the delay is excellent. Because here the functionality of the delay is to both emphasize the vocal break. It's also an FX and it is as well a riser. Well, it's not quite the riser here, but does it go up in pitch there? It does not, but well, it goes
This
for
one
an
does.
important point.
This one is the riser here.
Yeah. Yeah, that has the rise in the pitch there. But with the long ass delay like this, you can quite easily fiddle about with the rate of the delay and then have it lead into the next transition, which we oftentimes do. Just a little side note. Wasn't actually the case here, but it's the case with the Ableton metronome resampling we did.
Yep.
And what do we have there?
We have some more layers.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so it makes a little chord there. Let's hear them together.
So we have that and this one.
Yeah.
That sounds really nice. That harmony.
It's a nice clean fifth. Oh,
minus 5 plus 14.
Oh, it's
plus 7.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Power chord. And what is this?
Resample.
Resampled delay.
Nice.
So it's a lot of playing around with one sound, and all of the flair to it comes from these big rooms. That's
great.
Yeah. As well, a point that goes to show, we sit so many hours with this in a row, and it's because we're having a lot of fun, and that's really what you need if you want to. Well, of course, but it gotta come from a place where you really truly enjoy it, and have fun with it, man.
Yeah.
Like this tune it's a funny tune. That's also why the title is some of our funny slang.
I think
that's a little.
There's a lot of really serious music out there. Drum bass. There's a lot of serious types of drum bass, and we make a lot of different sorts of drum bass. We don't just make jungle. We don't just make any other kind, but we do try and have bring some fun into it. I don't know. I think there's room for any kind of expression if it sounds good, and this is just one of the expressions we go for is kind of playful in our writing.
Disclaimer. True. Very true. So let's see what else.
There's one sample I really want to go into, which is one of my favorite in the tune, and it's this guy here. Because sampling for me is one of the most fun things about making drum and bass. I always called it DJing, making music out of music, because you kind of make combinations that didn't exist before. And then with music, it's the same thing. Like everything is resampling and sampling stuff from. I really like video games and films. Like loads of people sample films. Video games is also a good one because there's some great samples. This one.
Stop! You violated the law.
Yes.
It's just such an iconic sample, I think, because it's from such an old game.
And also it plays into this jungle, run from the police kind of vibe.
Yeah.
While being, hilarious because of the recognition factor. So it's great to fit it in there. A sample so characteristic as that and so enjoyable.
It's a weird one because it doesn't necessarily stick out. I don't think it's that that obvious, but it kind of is, and it isn't. I don't know, weird.
Yeah, it tickles your memory for us anyway, and then it's also played down a bit like an offhand kind of effect.
Stop! You violated the law.
Here, just similar sort of chain, reverb, delay, OTT, EQ, and a DS, just cutting some of the resonances from the harsh sibilant areas.
Maybe we should shortly go into the mids, the little rasta section.
From the breakdown or from the intro?
Intro.
Okay, let's hear that.
I think. Is this the mid section?
Oh, mids or rasta?
Yeah, mids. Exactly. So this little, well, it's just, this orchestra consists of 2 instruments, and then so much tape delay as possible, where it still sounds good. The aim is to kind of establish an offhand, well, a B side to the main groove, as if the drum and bass drop actually is a remix of an existing old tune, and this existing old tune will sound something like this, and the guitar is the melody there. Then the piano seeks to add just a sense of chordal presence, and it does nothing. It just shops around in one chord, but all of the effects added on seek to fill out this frequency, the frequency range, so that it still sounds like a full orchestra playing a full arrangement, just to an extent, a very controlled extent. It's such a little amount we put into this, so to say. It's just these 2 MIDI files. But the goal is as well in the drop, in the intro, to fill it out completely, so that the high end is present, the mids are present, and the lows are present. And both in terms of frequencies, of course, but also in terms of musical roles. So let's hear that intro again real quick, just from halfway through there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now with everything on.
There's a really nice interplay between those like chords that hit on the off beats of the main melody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that one lift in the melody, just. So the mids are, as they say, they are just in the middle here, and then the FX. Yeah. All of the building characteristics now, which is not the mids, they seek to of course enhance on the kind of room we're in sonically, which is now this kind of Rastafari room, but also they seek to widen upon the overall frequency spectrum, so that we have everything present that we need for the intro. And that is a lack of sub, of course, and not so many low mids, but actually a lot of mids and high mids, and a lot of width, so much width, so that we save all the mono sub, which hits harder. We save that for the drop, while still building a lot of tension around that little instrumental journey that is only there to indicate that, this is a musical journey, but we're not expanding upon that story, so to say. It just indicates an organic room that we then exit. And again, we use this for the breakdown, now fused with the drop sounds, the horn especially.
Just looking at the processing of these sounds, quite very straightforward. This is something you love that I didn't have, but you showed it to me. Free guitar plugin, and just an Ableton standard piano.
And what is so great about these MIDI sounds that sound too MIDI is that once you process them heavily enough, this too MIDI is what makes it shine through as still a real instrument, because it will get too muddled up, too mushy if you put a lot of effects on good sounding real elements, one could say. But here you can really go crazy, and still it will shine through that it's trying to be a guitar, because the MIDI from the get-go is way too much what it's trying to be. It's a weird thing there.
So
and then a lot of room and shaping.
Turn off. See what it sounds like with the dry guitar.
Yeah, it sounds way too much like a MIDI, bad MIDI instrument.
I think there's another reverb somewhere as well. On here.
It's being sent? No, it's inside of. Oh,
This is dry.
That is dry.
That's hilarious. So with everything on, see that reverb does a lot, but then we just have basically, again, delay.
Yeah. Rasta. So it's a constant shaping into a few steps at a time. So now it's too thick, we cut some lows. Now it needs more highs, we add some highs. Now it needs some saturation, we do that. Then it maybe has too many highs, we cut a little bit of highs again. More saturation, more delay, more reverb. Small steps until you're happy in the end there. You can always build on top of these changes, even though if, for example, with the kick, if you have something which is good, you don't need all of this stuff, but you can, with small steps, build very far and really sculpt your sound just the way you want it. And it's great for these kind of MIDI, free MIDI, bad MIDI instruments.
Yeah. So yeah, the piano, simple, reverb and saturation, EQ, pretty, nothing major going on there. We then have some other elements that come in, very similar to our drum and bass story, where there's like tape delayed instruments coming in. It's quite cool.
It's again these really MIDI instruments, but the processing will save them and put them. That's my favorite.
That's a great one. It's only very few times. It's only used there like as that going into the 1B phrase. The rest of the time it's used as like a build. But then it adds so much for this transition, having this again, it's not something you really notice, but it's particularly in the final master where it's compressed more, it really just adds another layer onto that bass melody.
I love that, man. I really love that.
Great sound. And I think it was one of the ones, as any collaboration, you will have disagreements, obviously, and sometimes our disagreements are either one of us will be more stubborn than the other, and I think I was very, especially when you've been working for many hours just like straight, and your kind of temper, not your temper, but like you kind of have less of a capacity for bullshit maybe, and I was probably just like, I don't think we need the sound, and you were like, yeah, we do, we definitely need the sound, and you were right, we needed this sound, it's great. But
yeah, that's another thing about the collaboration is you are constantly grinding against each other in a way towards the same thing, though parallelly, but still the shoulders are, or something like this, the shoulders are always meeting, and you're going somewhere, and that grinding is what makes Octavate. And these are one of the cases in one of the funny feuds, and I think it was in there more, but just having it like that so little is also what's making it excellent in a way. It's funny stuff.
Yeah. And then going into the breakdown, there are some strings introduced. This is very typical of Anders.
Like organy?
Organ sounds, really nice stacked chords and melodies that you'll put down, particularly in the breakdown, and they sound great.
Yeah, for organs, to make them exciting sounding, filter and tremulator is always great. And this is just two simple chords changing in between them. And in order for it to sound better, it needed a lot of movement, because stacks of chords, especially with saw wave or the analog real life version, which is the organ, so to say, you will just have an issue adding stuff. All the art lies in where you remove. So the story is different sets of movements in terms of filter, volume, and auto panning that serves as tremulator. Okay, got a bit weird in the end there. Sound pretty nice though. Then frequency shift to always frequency shift on your big chord stacks, especially if you want to get away from them. Instantly you transition this role of the instrument into being a riser or down riser. And you can really just throw it out the window the next transition, because it will sound nice and DJ-y, like, oh yeah, I'm turning down this tune now, new phrase, new stuff, forget about the past. So that's really great for when you get crazy like this and come too far out of tangent. Then you can just fuck it off, really. Sorry, my language.
So yeah, I mean, used here with the frequency shifter, very simple, easy way of getting that riser. You know, it's just automated the fine tuning, and then you've done some really cool stuff in here with the auto pan. Wanna go into that?
Yeah.
Like,
let's see the automations. So yeah, it's a matter of looking at what other story elements are there and where the space kind of is for this to breathe, when it will breathe. And it's going with the bass right now, I think. Let's hear it all, actually. So the horn is muting it. And then the spacing of the drums and bass is kind of dictating the overall breathing of these movements. It comes in all the breaks there as a kind of atmospheric reply to the same old story of bass, actually. So that's how it's different. The drums are replaced by chords, one could say. Organ chords.
And then finally, in the 2D phrase, as another new guitar introduced, or variation. I mean, this is also quite typical of our tunes. We do really like an electric guitar. I think you really convinced me about the electric guitar. Used right in the right style tune, it just brings a really nice sense of organicness again.
Yeah, so it's
I mean, that's got groove.
So it's a stack upon the old bass line, so to make a little interplay there. And the same actually is done in the end of the breakdown. There is a little extra melody guitar added, but again, it's
down here.
Yeah, let's just hear that. Yeah. So it's again a matter of filling up the amount of elements, one could say. We want to make this big. It's spacing out, but it's as well ramping up, and it's building up in sheer size while still being very spacious. So stacking more elements into this simple melodic story of a couple chords, and just as you would stack breaks, we stack instruments here to really gain that orchestra feeling, so that we want it big. That's the principle behind it.
Yeah.
And those are most of the elements kind of looked into. The entire story of this is quite chaotic in a way that it's a sum as well. It's also more refined than many of our own projects, even though many more parts as well are more mysterious, because we are two people who have been about this, and that's great.
It definitely tells a story. It is chaotic. There is a lot going on, but it tells a story, and I think it is. It's a fun jungle track, and yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much it, actually.
There's a couple of other things I just wanted to go through quickly. The sends we have.
Yes, do that.
We talked about the horn send, which is just a big rack. Drums. It gets into D, which is a small drum room.
Yes.
Just small Ableton reverb EQ, and it also gets sent to F, which is a transient layer. So that's just two transient shapers, one with no attack and no sustain, and one with the sustain boosted. So it's like you're cutting everything. So it's just a layer that doesn't have very harsh transients. It doesn't have a lot of sustain. Then boosting that back up, compressing it to boost it some more, saturating it, amping it, drum bus.
It's more gritty flesh.
Yep.
This one, it seems.
So just adds to that.
Yeah, try A-Bing it on off this end. Yes. very alike the processing done on the MIDI instruments, as these drums can sound too controlled without these sends on, because we are very careful about the mix there.
So again, it's like putting the instruments, in this case the drum kit, in a room. The room is put together with that sense of reverb, compressed layer, transient layer, similar to how the bass is sent to the horn room, and that gives it its space throughout the tune. I think that was, we already touched upon the master chain. Like I said, very simple, not much going on. Just basically a soft clip and then a little bit of gain reduction on the ozone maximizer. Keep it lightweight. And then referencing, typically have a reference group at the top where you can just A/B between either other tunes and older versions of your own tune. So this is being A/B'd against version 2.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound... Oh, the reason it sounds different is because I have a utility on the master for the stream purposes.
Yeah, so copy this utility
Okay, cool.
on top of the other.
Yeah. So it's lacking some the top end in the drums and some of the energy, so maybe there were tweaks to this combination of sends and the drum processing itself in this final version, just to give it a bit more life and glue things together. So I think that was everything I wanted to go through. Is there anything else from your side?
Not really, no. So maybe some closing remarks. Thanks for watching, guys. We always enjoy this kind of stuff, and we learn more stuff about our tunes as well going through it like this. It's also a revision. It's some time ago we signed this one off and all that. So that's very nice, and we want to say just big ups for being a part of the 174 arrangement here. Really cool stuff, and
keep on creating, keep on
training
your ears. Music production is just about learning consistently and training your ears, and it can be difficult starting out. Obviously people will be at very different stages, but it's difficult to know how to get your tune to that finished state when in the early few years, because it's just difficult to find out the problem areas. Like for example, something a lot of drum groups are lacking, or that can help with a drum mix, is boosting around the 1.2 to 1.8k region, and also there's another boost here at the 10k region. These are areas that you can boost on a group, and it can get your tune closer to that finished sounding stage when you're A/B'ing between other professionally mastered tunes. Obviously it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. You can't just slap it on every tune and it works, but it's about knowing the problem areas, and the areas which sound nice to boost helps you in order to get those tunes finished and get them to a state where you can send them out to labels. So hopefully the stuff in this video can you might hopefully you find it useful, and keep on learning and making tunes.
Oh yeah. And also, as producers, it's gotta get used to the feeling of insecurity. That as well is something that, even today, opening up this track and hearing it, one can be insecure, even though it's signed off to a good label. That, well, who can enjoy this? Is it even good? And all this. So we all sit with that. And
it's real, the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, but
if you live in it, you're doing it.
Yeah, there was a really good quote actually recently I saw, which was...
Was that the quote?
If you live in it, you're doing it. That is a quote, but it was more like it was about a stonemason who carves a perfect sculpture. And it's not about the sculpture he's carved, it's about the 1,000 sculptures before that he has chipped away at in order to get good enough to make that final sculpture. So
yeah, and in this case it's more like you sculpt 1,000 times, and then one of them could be the golden idea or the golden processing that you stumbled upon.
Exactly.
One of my friends as well, who's a lead singer in a band, he says that, and well, it made me think about this, that as a musician, you are a gatherer, and you keep this open ear, and you want to experiment as much as possible, and always expose yourself to new stuff that you are ready to recognize as good, and as well you need to be ready to recognize what is bad. And that is why musicians become better and better with time, because their ears get more and more refined, their taste refined, and it's a constant journey. I feel that, yeah, me and George, we are very, very early stages, and we are soon nearing the age of 30, one could say. So it's a lifelong grind, and it only gets better. Every day gets better.
Yeah, but the journey is what's the fun part, not the end goal. So just enjoy it, make fun tunes, have a good time. Right.
And thank you for today.
That's enough of the life waffle. Let's wrap up and
yeah,
peace out.